kiss me, leave me on red. I'm the one who's waking up in your bed. I'm the one you brag about to your friends. So why can't I call you my man? No, don't you dare be wasting time. I need you to say, won't you be mine? 'Cause your mama loves me, and your daddy too. Can you please just tell me what else I gotta do? Why don't you love me? You said I'm funny. That's not enough, babe. 'Cause I keep on slipping through you. You wanna go.
Tēnā tātou I te whare. Tūtaua mai e runga, tūtaua mai e raro, tūtaua mai e roto, tūtaua mai e wao, kia tau ai. Te mauritu, te mauri ora, ki te katoa, haumi e hui e.
Tai ki e.
Good evening everyone and welcome. Following our opening karakia, I would like to welcome you to the National Museum of New Zealand, Te Papa Tongarewa. Ke aku nui, ke aku rahi, ke aku rangatira. Tēnā koutou katoa. Nau mai haere mai ki te whare pūpuri taonga Te Papa Tongarewa. Haere mai koutou ki te kaupapa kōrero o whakaurua moko, nō reira, tēnā koutou katoa. So good evening everyone, my name is Kat, I am part of the public programmes team. It's been my pleasure to organise the Active Land series alongside the staff from the Natural Hazard Commission, Tokatu Ake. My role this evening is a short one. I'm just here to introduce and close and also to share some health and safety. So whare paku, if anybody needs the toilet at any time, please head out around the pounamu and down the corridor. In the unlikely event of an emergency, please follow the guidance from our visitor hosts. We have a couple at the back of the room either wearing a black t-shirt or a red fleece. Please use this opportunity to turn your phones on to silent and turn off any alarms you might have. You're very welcome to take photos, but please turn off the flash. One other thing to note is that tonight's talk is being live streamed, so kia ora koutou to our online audience, and the recording will be available to view on YouTube afterwards. So please comment in the chat if you are joining us online. We've got a member of the team monitoring the chat and you'll have the opportunity to have your questions asked during the Q&A at the end. So I'm excited to introduce this evening's talk, Weaving Mātauranga Māori with Resilience Planning for a Stronger Aotearoa New Zealand. This is the final talk in our three-part series of Active Lands talks. The series highlights the amazing mahi of researchers working on diverse topics linked to natural hazards across the motu and how we can be prepared to live with them. The series has been made possible thanks to Te Papa's ongoing partnership with the Natural Hazard Commission, Tokatu Ake, and this is one that's been going for 25 years, so we're very grateful for them. I'm now going to hand over to Matthew Gifford, the Strategic Advisor Te Ao Māori, Po Whirinaki at NHC and this evening's facilitator. He will introduce our esteemed speakers. Kia ora, Matthew.
Thank you, Kat. Tēnā koe, o tira tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome to this evening's talk. Ka tika pēr kia mihi ake nei kia koe, Kat. Tō tātou pā whakawairua e te arero taiaha mō ue pai here tia te rangi ki te whenua mō ue pai here tia te whenua ki te rangi. O tira kia tātou, tēnā koutou, nau mai hara mai, and welcome, good evening everyone, and welcome to this talk today. Ki roto I tēnei whare, nei tēnei whare ātāhua, korongo mai rairoa. Really lovely to be here in Te Papa Tongarewa, and welcoming you all here today for this exciting, I think, discussion on Mātauranga Māori, all things Mātauranga Māori, natural hazards. If you imagine all of those things wrapped up into one hour, accelerating hour, I should say, then you've landed in the right place. On this, a very balmy Wellington Tuesday evening, and thank you for choosing to share your Tuesday evening with us. I should also, as Kat has done, acknowledge those of you who have joined us online. Mihi nui ana kia koutou, ki roto I ngā kāinga huri noi te motu I tēnei pō. Thank you for being with us this evening as well. This is Kōrero Whakarua Moko, Active Land Talk, and it is the third and final series, final part of this three-part series here at Te Papa Tongarewa in the beautiful Rongo Maraeroa Marae. Matt Gifford is my name. I'm going to facilitate and guide us through this evening's discussion with our panel of experts in this field, and it is a privilege to be here tonight to talk about the guidance, or with the guidance of our experts, I should say, weaving mātauranga Māori resilience planning and building a more resilient Aotearoa New Zealand for everybody. And at the Natural Hazards Commission at Toka Tuake, we are about building resilience to natural hazards with a mission to reduce the impact of natural hazards on people, on property, and on communities. We do this by providing home insurance against natural hazards damage, but also through investing in research and education that helps lessen the impact of these events. And through our long-standing partnership, as Kat has mentioned, with Te Papa Tongarewa, we launched this Active Land Talk series, to showcase some of the ways that research is being used to support our understanding of natural hazards and how we can better prepare for them. Nō reira, kia huri katoa tātou ki ngā aronga nui o te pōnei. Let us turn to our kaupapa of the evening, or our discussion topics of the evening, and that is Te Toi Whakaruru Hau. Koera te kaupapa e whakakotahi nei a tātou i tēnei pō. Tonight we are grateful to hear from three renowned speakers from Te Toi Whakaruru Hau, the Māori Disaster Risk Reduction Research Centre, who will share their mātauranga, their knowledge, their pūkenga, their more hio, their all of those good things, and perspectives on taking a te ao Māori approach to resilience planning that responds to the needs identified by communities and in accordance with kaupapa Māori. Te Toi Whakaruru Hau is a research centre hosted at Massey University. It is centred within te ao Māori and is dedicated to addressing Māori disaster risk reduction aspirations in partnership with iwi, with hapu, with whānau, as well as national and regional authorities. The centre is future focused. It aims not only to build resilience to events in our own lifetime, but indeed for those generations that come after us. And to do this, it works with iwi whānui and partners with New Zealand's emergency management infrastructure to develop the next generation of Māori researchers, some of which Cassie and I were just talking about before we started here, as well as the disaster risk and resilience research capacities of communities and practitioners. It is indeed a pleasure for Toka Tuake, the Natural Hazards Commission, to be a proud supporter of this kaupapa since the centre's launch in 2020. So without further ado, I'm just going to give us a little bit of a framework as to how the evening is going to go. I will quickly take you through an introduction for each of the speakers, and then I'll invite the speakers to come up, who will share approximately 10 minutes per speaker, give or take. After everyone has spoken, we'll have an opportunity for questions and answers, and you'll have a chance to ask our questions. So I do ask, please, that you hold your questions until the very end. And I also understand that online, if you are joining us online, you can ask a question through the online chat function, and I believe it is Poppy that will be picking up those questions and passing those through into the room. So without any further ado, folks, I'll assume that is all very clear. And kia huri katoa tātou ki tō tātou kai kōrero tuatahi o te pō. Let us go to our very first speaker of the evening, where we'll hear from distinguished Professor Christine Kenny no Te Atiawa, Ngāti Toa Rangatira, Ngai Tahu. Christine is co-director of research for the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences and the Distinguished Professor of Disaster Risk Management at Massey University. Christine has a dual background in sociology and public health, which has informed her global disaster risk reduction research and policy work with the United Nations on climate change, health emergencies, terrorism risk and resilience. Christine is equally committed to supporting the aspirations and well-being of tangata whenua, and is the current Kaiwhakahaere Matua, the director of Te Toi Whakaruru Hau, or Aotearoa, which she will no doubt tell us about this evening. E te iwi, kia whakanuia mai tēnei rangatira o tātou, tēnei ahorangi, tēnei mātanga nei. Please join me in welcoming distinguished Professor Christine Kenny.
Testing. Tēnā koutou. Haere mai no mai piki mai ki tēnei kōrero. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As you can see, I'm what is referred to as a waka blonde. In my whānau, we've come out all the colours of the rainbow. So I'm going to start the ball rolling with a little bit of conversation around Matauranga Māori and what it is. And wiser heads than my own have added some very important key points on this. So Sihirini Morkel Mead's perspective, it's complex. It's part of our culture and it's linked to our identity. Professor Samason Jury, it's evolving knowledge. Its values might be derived from long ago, but the knowledge itself changes and is always refreshed, renewed and relevant. And that's because we have a long history with tanga whenua in this country of adapting to change. Distinguished Professor Graham Smith, he talks a lot about linking matauranga and old ways of knowing to specific specialisations, not so different from contemporary Western science. And there were requirements that our old scientists had to meet to have access to these very specialised bodies of knowledge. I very cheekily have put myself in the mix as a co-author of the Global Assessment Report, the most recent one, where for the first time the United Nations decided that it was really important to profile in a genuine way Indigenous bodies of knowledge, and I'm going to come back to that in a minute. But in its simplest sense, Matauranga Māori is about living, being and knowing, all of those ways combined. It can be described as encompassing values, our creation stories, our identities, the ways we translate knowledge, and it's always derived from uniquely Māori worldviews. And what I would say is that most other Indigenous people have similar approaches, but not quite the same. So a lot of people say to me, oh, it's a bit waffly and it's not truly rigorous or scientific, and how is it relevant for the contemporary times? So I'm going to take a little bit of a divergence back to prior to the Tarawera eruption, because we're talking about active land, and to a waiata that was developed by the prophet, described by Dame Judith Binney, the historian, Te Kuti. So Te Kuti wrote a waiata, or a traditional Māori song, and when you look at it line by line, it is very equivalent to a contemporary volcanic risk assessment. Line 1 addresses changes to the flora because of geochemical changes, which indicated from Matauranga Māori that an eruption was imminent. The next line had Te Kuti going to see particular areas on Tarawera to observe. So we're talking about volcanic monitoring platforms to look at volcanic activity. There was a small lake at that time, and he went out to look at that, to look at the temperature, to see what the lake was doing in terms of colour. All of these things, when we look at contemporary volcanic eruptions, are not uncommon assessments for volcanologists. Professor Proctor will talk a little more about that when he speaks. But what is interesting is that Te Kuti took that and he put it in what we would call a risk assessment tool in contemporary times, and then he proceeded to take it to all of the marae that were in the ashfall zone before the eruption and shared that knowledge as a warning tool. What's been interesting is that a previous postgraduate student worked with that waiata to develop a tool, an educational risk communication tool for her hapu. And she combined it with a GIS map of potential risk areas and traditional stories. So that triangulation made a very useful tool for Tūhoe. One example, let's look at another from the South Island. So in 1907, Alfred Grace sat down in early times and talked to a number of Māori down the South Island, and he loved the old stories, and he had a very successful book called The Legends of Māori Time, which was published in London. And in it he wrote a story about the rival wizards. You can see them described here, and the 3 waves in the middle of a battle. However, I have colleagues who are geoscientists, paleogeologist, Associate Professor Dan Hikaroa, and environmental science, now iwi's chief executive, Dr. Darren King, who was working for NIWA at the time. They thought there might be a little bit more to this than meets the eye. So under National Science Challenge Research, they went down and talked to the iwi, and what they discovered was that these names in the story actually existed. There was quite a history, and in fact, Alfred Grace's informant was the son of Te Whetū, a respected Ngāti Kōwhata leader, and he'd actually lived on Rangitoto or D'Urville Island, depending on which title you'd like to use. And the iwi confirmed the story originated from the region, and that it recorded tsunami impacts. Well, being scientists, we like to be rigorous. So cores were put down, as you can see. And what they've been able to develop from that is an extremely accurate tsunami inundation map for the Nelson Tasman area about what has happened in the past, and that's gone on to inform risk communication for civil defence in the region today. So just 2 little examples. So what we know about Mataronga Māori is that in the past, periods of adversity have promoted changes to lands and people, and for Māori who are adaptive and have continued to adapt, and our knowledge is evolving, as I said earlier, this is normal. That knowledge preserves not just hundreds but thousands of years of environmental changes and also human responses. So our responses to adversity are informed by the past, crafted through connections between people and the natural world. I've already indicated that Mataronga Māori is unfinalised, it's complex, so it can't be simplified or just made interchangeable with Western disaster risk reduction science and land use management science. Where we are today as Māori scientists is looking to bring Mataronga Māori into conversation with disaster risk reduction, natural hazards, volcanology, geosciences, in ways that recognise how Mataronga Māori can enable conceptual and also practice adaptation. So it's that cross-fertilisation space. And I've put in the braided river metaphor, it's one of many, to indicate that it is a situation where these strains of thought come together to talk to each other, but they are still discrete entities in their own right. So Mataronga Māori is a uniquely New Zealand body of knowledge. And how does that translate into looking at our active lands and how we respond in contemporary times? So I've put up one of the raft of United Nations strategies and frameworks that govern how the world responds to challenges. The Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, signed in Japan in 2015, is an important document because New Zealand is a signatory to it and has to report on how it meets the priorities of which there are 4. And in that, there is a huge call for greater diversity through the inclusion of Indigenous peoples, perspectives and knowledges in the design and implementation of all hazard policies, plans, and also standards for response and recovery. So ensuring that Indigenous knowledges are included alongside scientific knowledge is a key priority. So let's look at the New Zealand context. So the priority in question is priority 2. It's about strengthening disaster risk governance to manage disasters, and the subclause specifically states to empower local authorities to work and coordinate with Indigenous peoples in disaster risk reduction at the local level. Now, here in New Zealand, we've seen incredible responses from Māori communities, and it doesn't matter where there's a major disaster, Māori mobilise, usually nationally, exceptionally quickly. So we saw it with the Canterbury earthquakes, we saw it with the Kaikoura earthquakes, cyclones Debbie and Cook through the Bay of Plenty into Hawke's Bay, Tasman Nelson bushfires. And then last year we had the horrific anniversary floods in Auckland and the impacts of ex-tropical cyclone Gabrielle. I've misspelled it, apologies. She was a wicked beast, I have to say, and caused a lot of damage. And in all of those, Māori mobilised nationally. And I think it's important to remember that the asset base now for iwi katoa and Māori interests is sitting at about $72 billion. It's been used repeatedly to support whole communities in the past, and it will be in the future. So an important voice. So let's take an example. So the Kaikoura Waiau earthquake sequence from the 14th of November 2016 was felt through a big part of the country. We had a massive earthquake. There was a tsunami, and there was a series of subsequent earthquakes. Anyone here with damage to their house as a result of that earthquake, minor or major? Yes, one hand up. There's my hand up. You can see the number of landslides, 2 deaths, a lot of injuries, but catastrophic damage to infrastructure and loss of industries, which was hugely problematic. And how did the local Māori community were heavily impacted, because most people know about the Whale Watch Tours as a major industry that is run by the local Ngāti Kuri in partnership with Ngāi Tahu. They opened their marae. They worked with Te Rūnanga o Ngāi Tahu. They provided shelter, meals, clothing, showers, baby food. They helped evacuate and transport tourists and local residents, 10,000 meals and 1,700 care packages in the first week delivered. Amazing. Sheltered 500 people, registered and supported 1,000 who were in need of assistance. And this is because this is what Māori do and have been doing for hundreds of years when we have major activity with the land and there's a catastrophic impact. So a lot of this has been taken very careful note of by central government, local government and key actors. And so in 2019, the National Resilience Strategy was developed, and section 4.3 recognises this and has taken a very clear point of making the statement that part of that national strategy is to build the relationship with emergency management systems before they happen, and as part of that it's building recognition of the role of culture, including Māori ways of knowing, which is Tauranga Māori, Tikanga Māori, play in our wider resilience. So that was a very quick tootle through. And that brings us to Te Toi Whakaruruhau o Aotearoa. This is a centre that was established in response to desires to build Māori capability in the science sector, but also to bridge that gap between Māori communities, iwi hapu, local governance, the National Emergency Management Agency, and to bring the different parts of communities together so that we don't see the same issues happening again and again. And there's still a ways to go. We have a new bill underway with, and there is going to be some level of provision that will support engagement in that. With Te Toi, though, for our team, our focus was on developing the next generation of young Māori researchers, both at the postgraduate level, but also working with iwi and hapu to do the same on the ground, and provide a forum where Māori scientists, Māori scholars that are active in this space and dealing with issues around active land could come together. So we began as a small 3-year project, and we've now morphed into an ongoing one. We have 50 to 60 affiliates, And I'm not going to say any more about that because Dr. Phibbs is going to address those key points. So on that note, I would like to take this opportunity to hand back to Matt to introduce Professor Proctor.
Very good. Thank you. A round of applause, please. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Christine. Tēnei te mihi nui atu ki a koe, e te pūkenga, e te mātanga, e te rangatira, tēnā koe I ngā kōrero, I ngā whakaaro. Thank you very much for sharing with us today. And I think a couple of really interesting points, and one of which I got a slight sneak preview, if I may call it that, just before we came on stage about mātauranga Māori and the various perspectives. And I think, you know, some renowned scholars up there, I think, and certainly in Te Ao Māori, when we look at Tā Mason and Professor Graham Smith, amongst others. And I think one thing that we reflected on earlier, and it certainly seems quite relevant, is that mātauranga Māori is something of a reasonably recent but also an evolving idea or an evolving notion of how we understand and interact with mātauranga Māori. But credit to you, Professor, for the work that you have been doing. I would never have considered Te Kōti a volcanologist amongst all the other things that we know and understand of Te Kōti in his rather colourful character that he is known as in Ngā Kōrero Tukuihoa Ngā Mātua Tipuna. So thank you very much. Once again, a real pleasure, and what a way to open our kōrero today. Let us move on now to our second speaker of the evening. We will very shortly hear from Professor John Proctor from Muaupoko, Ngāi Tahu. John is a volcanologist and chair of natural hazards at Massey University, a contributor to developing research that focuses on volcanic hazard simulation and working with communities to increase resilience to natural and environmental hazards. Professor John Proctor manages the Volcanic Risk Solutions Research Group and has contributed nationally to developing new research directions in volcanology. Being one of only a handful of Māori professorial scientists, John feels he has a duty to contribute to Māori developments and methods to contribute to Indigenous knowledge. His greatest contribution in this respect has been the development of a new area of research on Indigenous knowledge, volcanic hazards, and building resilience in Indigenous knowledge using GIS and remotely sensed technologies. Tonight, Professor John Proctor will be covering the intersections of mātauranga Māori, natural hazards, and sciences. Nō reira, e te rangatira, e te mātanga Muaupoko, Ngāi Tahu, tēnā koe, tēnā koutou. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Professor John Proctor.
Kia ora koutou. I feel like the scientist sandwiched between two social scientists, so hopefully I don't go off tangent of the talk too much. I'm just trying to figure this out here. Just as a bit of a background, as Matthew pointed out, I'm Muaupoko from the Horowhenua. I sort of escaped the iwi in the Horowhenua and wanted to become a scientist and made the massive jump from Levin all the way through Palmerston North to learn more about our active landscapes. And coming from a place like Horowhenua, which literally translates to moving land, I suppose it was ingrained in me. But somehow I got dragged back into the Māori and iwi space after I went through my science training, and I've tried to find that crossover between mātauranga Māori or Te Ao Māori and the science community as well. So hopefully I'll share some of that today. But just as a reminder, we live in a very active landscape. Volcanoes are probably one of the fastest changing landscape modifying processes that we have in New Zealand. We have a large number of potentially active volcanoes across our landscape. So this is sort of the 12 to 13 that GNS monitor through GeoNet as well. And currently I think we have 2 active volcanoes, Ruapehu and Whakaari are erupting. Whakaari's erupting at the moment, and Ruapehu is always bubbling away there as well. And so these landscapes have been very active. Māori have observed a lot of these changes in this active landscape as well. And so just to jump through the talk, in the last 200 years or so, since settlers arrived, our volcanoes look like giant lumbering mountains in the landscape, not really doing much, just sitting around, not really active. But over the last sort of 1,000 years that Māori have been on this landscape, some of our volcanoes have looked like that. So they've changed quite dramatically. And so these dramatic landscape changes have also generated a whole lot of new knowledge, but also contributed to culture around these areas as well. So Māori and iwi have adapted and responded to these events over many generations, and that has informed a knowledge base as well that then is passed down from generation to generation. But coming back to the science of volcanoes, volcanoes are amazing features in our landscape. Unlike earthquake, which just have a bit of shaking and then it sort of ends, we have a volcanic eruption that can actually go on for months to years. And not only do we get sort of the eruption cloud with ash, we can get lahars, pyroclastic flows, gases, a whole lot of things which will kill you. And I think that's sort of some of the attraction to volcanologists studying these areas, is all the possible things that can happen. And all these phenomena have been recorded over many generations from Māori and iwi living in these areas as well. And there's a whole knowledge base around some of these behaviours. Bringing it back to modern day of why it's probably important to understand some of this mātauranga Māori, or these cultural responses to these active landscapes, is actually present day. The red areas up there show how much land Māori actually own within these volcanic areas. So Okataina, Taupo and Tongariro Ruapehu, large portions of that landscape is actually owned by Māori. And today they're facing a lot of challenges around how they keep people safe on those lands as well, and what are their responsibilities and obligations. Alongside the green areas, which are the Department of Conservation, which are now subject to many co-governance and co-management arrangements. So it's very relevant about how we manage hazards and risk on these lands and landscapes. But just to jump back, Cassie gave an amazing introduction into Mātauranga Māori. And I'm not really going to go there much further than it is an epistemology that is transferred and transferable through different methods over many generations. And I think over the last 1,000 years, Mātauranga Māori has been very effective at transferring knowledge about our active landscapes and our volcanoes, and how to respond to the different phenomena that our volcanoes produce as well. If you talk to people like Sir Mason Jury and Graham Smith, there's sort of attributes associated with Indigenous knowledge that it's very much based on long-term understandings of change of our landscapes. It's very powerful at predicting local change. It's holistic in nature. It's focused on people's well-being, so people are not sort of separate from the system. They're part of the system. They're part of the landscape, and they can be affected as much as any other part of the landscape as well. It's non-hierarchical and non-linear, which is really cool for some of the mathematical models that we develop and the forecasts that we produce as well. There is an amazing knowledge base about the active processes on our landscape. There are atua and tipua associated with just about every change in our landscape from Māori. Alongside that, there's also an ontology, almost a language developed around classifying the different rock types that we see in our environment, but also understanding how those rock types formed and related back to this giant whakapapa, or family tree, I suppose, of all these connections between those atua, tipua and these rocks, and all the different changes that we see in our landscape as well. And so if we jump straight into the volcanic areas, Māori traversed the Pacific and arrived into this very active volcanic landscape. Volcanoes were not foreign to them from their places of origin. They'd experienced a certain type of volcanism in Polynesia, and as they traversed the Pacific, they came to this very different land. And so it was not unusual that stories and narratives were formed around the eruptions and the phenomena that they see across the Pacific as well. So Rangitahua, or the Kermadec, became an important marker point in the Pacific for them to come down to Aotearoa as well. So there's stories and narratives of Rangitahua erupting and providing that mark, that guiding way for them to come down to Aotearoa, as well as an island to land on to take refuge at time as well. And as we sort of see the migrations come down and hit mainland Aotearoa, we have the narratives of Ngā Tōrarangi coming on land and exploring that volcanic zone, and recording narratives of battling evil wizards erupting out of the earth, and how he stamped them back down in a giant battle that turned the sky to night with lightning and all sorts of phenomena occurring around that eruption. And that could be correlated with the Kaharoa eruption of about 800 years ago from Okataina as well. I always like to think that that eruption from Okataina, the Kaharoa eruption, which spread a large ash cloud all the way from Northland all the way across to Gisborne, would have been seen by the iwi arriving to the shores of Aotearoa. And I like to think that New Zealand is the land of the long white ash cloud rather than a long white cloud. And then as they came across this landscape, they drew parallels to the Pacific and the origins in the Pacific about how this giant, I suppose, ring of fire, Pacific ring of fire, is connected all the way around the Pacific as well. So they brought knowledge with them, but they also developed new knowledge here. Over time, they recognized that our volcanoes as individual entities. These volcanoes took on different forms, they took on different behaviors, they erupted in different ways and became angry with each other in very different ways. And so not only did there's stories and narratives about how the volcanoes battled with each other, but it's also stories and narratives about the different products they produced, the different rock types, whether some produced lava flows, whether some erupted, whether some produced lahars as well. And so there's narratives about each of these volcanoes becoming its own person. And as we move through time, we see iwi connecting to these individual entities as well and becoming part of their whakapapa, becoming part of their culture and driving some important aspects of their cultural narratives as well. As we move sort of through time and we come to the early 1800s, 1700s, the stories about these volcanoes and their behaviours, their personalities become even more prevalent, with more narratives developed around people not respecting them, not behaving appropriately around some of these areas. And then there's the idea that if you don't behave appropriately, you don't respect them, then you'll suffer from some bad omen or retribution from your bad behaviour as well. And so those narratives are littered throughout Taranaki, the central North Island, all the way through to Tarawera. Modern times, a lot of my work is focused on working with Ngāti Rangi around Ruapehu and understanding their history and their connection in recent times with that volcano as well. So Ngāti Rangi, from a European context, has responded to and recovered from numerous events from 1945 to 1953 Lahar, all the way through to the 95 eruptions, 2007 Lahar, and then 2012 Te Māori. And interspersed amongst all those points in time are also periods of unrest and potential activity as well that they've had to manage and work with the community to keep them calm at various times, but also provide some leadership around responding to some of these events as well. But for me, working with Ngāti Rangi has really reinforced that the volcano is part of their whakapapa, it's part of their identity. They descend from it. And having that figure in their whakapapa, they learn to respect that entity and they learn to treat it not as a hazard, not as something that's bad, but something that is moody and grumpy at times. They refer to it as their koro. He's going to get angry, he's going to get smelly, just like all grandfathers do. But it's not to treat it as a hazard or treat it as bad. It's just something that happens in the environment and something that we need to respond to and recover from. And this has sort of driven some of our ideas around what we do in the hazard space. So getting more details about some of the management practices around Ruapehu, one of the probably largest hazard zones, if I could say, is Te Oni Tapu, the sacred sands, which is basically the desert road in this area where you get a lot of ashfall, lahars, pyroclastic flows at odd times, all creating this alluvial ring plane at the base of the volcano. And so access to this area was well managed. It was certain tikanga and kawa around accessing this area and undertaking activities in here. All the way through to people were guided by tohunga or particular people in the iwi through this area if they wanted to traverse it. Their eyes were hidden by kawa leaves. There were no fires. They were quickly rushed through this area. Otherwise, if they spent too long in these areas, they would either be frozen to death or burnt to death by various kaitiaki or tipua, or washed away as well. And some of these management practices are not uncommon across New Zealand. For example, some of the early stories about crossing Rokawakawa or Cook Strait, there were certain people amongst iwi that would only guide the waka, and everyone else used to have to hide their eyes with kawakawa leaves as well. And so we do a very similar thing. We look at the geology, we understand the landscapes, we produce hazard maps that some people look at and most people don't. We produce simulations to sort of guide what might happen next. So there's a lot of parallels around producing these hazard zones and trying to understand what's going to happen next. And even today, DOC will take some of these practices and produce exclusion zones and come up with management recommendations on what happens in these exclusion zones as well. And so there's a lot of parallels between traditional practice and what we do as hazard managers or geoscientists today. But where does that lead us in terms of what we're trying to do next around forecasting? And if you explore in depth some of the narratives around Ruapehu and Tongariro, there is almost an understanding of probabilities of when events are going to occur next. There was almost an understanding that Te Māori would erupt every generation, or every time an Ariki passed away, there was going to be an eruption. So there's almost that generational aspect that every 25 to maybe 50 years there's an eruption. Ruapehu understood that if you look at agricultural practices around there, areas were sort of left fallow for up to 7 to 10 years, and then they'll be replenished by ash and make that land fertile. So it was not something we were afraid of, it was actually doing something good for the environment there as well. We understand probabilities by looking at the ash falls, we graph them, we plot them, we put numbers to them, and we come up with probabilities such as very similar to what iwi do. An eruption likely every 40 years. Once we have an eruption, there's almost a 54% chance that eruption is going to get bigger and cause some damage as well. But there's also indicators about change, and we really want to get into this forecasting aspect and how do we draw these two knowledge systems together to provide better forecasts. And this is a quick picture of an eel, a very bad picture of an eel. This is a story when I was working around the Laha that came down in 2007. A lot of the locals would tell us that they'd know when the Laha's coming because all the eels would jump out of the river and get out of the way of the Laha, and we thought, oh yeah, okay, sure. And then actually in 2007, as the Laha was coming down the river and we're trying to get ahead of it to catch the wave, we were walking on the farmland and we were tripping up on all these eels wriggling around on the farmland. And so there's observations and detailed information at that local level which makes forecasting and predicting probably almost possible in some locations. There's also currently a lot of active monitoring around waterways and lakes which give indicators of change in the environment or volcanic change in the environment. This one here, Rotakura, whenever it turns white like this, which is not biological, it's an indicator that the volcano is likely to erupt. And so we took this photo in 2019, I think. It entered into a major period of unrest at that stage and didn't erupt, which is very disappointing for a volcanologist. But we wanted to look at that information and sort of compare it to what we do in terms of science. And so if we look at GeoNet, we look at that system, we basically have seismometers, we have GPS systems around the maunga. And if we look at how robust that data is and how long it's been out there, it's only been out there for up to 20 years in some cases. It's collected a very small amount of data. And so the data that we have is actually not wide-ranging enough and not over a longer term enough to produce forecasts using some of these techniques up here, these statistical forecasting techniques along the top here. The red is bad, so we can't really do much machine learning or AI with the data we have. The best thing we can do is sort of expert interpretation, which is code for getting a bunch of scientists in a room and having a good guess about what might happen next. So we wanted to see if we could supplement this data with some of these traditional indicators as well. And so that's where we're heading next. We've proposed this sort of project of Matatui. Can we unlock that tohu, those indicators in the environment around other things which happen which aren't monitored, but iwi are monitoring them? Can we put those into those statistical frameworks that we use to produce forecasts, those probabilities? And can we strengthen the way that we give forecasts as well? This is the last slide. So the key messages is that I think iwi are not afraid of using numbers. They're not afraid of probabilities. They're not afraid of making forecasts. I think they're so used to seeing the landscape change that there's an ingrained nature amongst our iwi of having that ability to say what's going to happen next. And they weren't afraid to say what's happened next. And so I think for geoscientists, it's good that we start working with probabilities and numbers and working together to present them to the community of what might happen next. I always find that hazard maps are very hard to work with. A lot of people don't understand maps, they don't understand some of the data on maps, and so it seems to be a lot easier to talk to Indigenous cultures around the world about probabilities or possibilities of what might happen as well. And I think that was my last slide. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Tēnā koe, Professor John Proctor. Really interesting talk there. I think a couple of things I think about there. Firstly, I think a really profound example of mātauranga Māori and Western science, matatuhi. I see that as a really exciting coming together of those worlds and sciences and knowledges. But also I think you're onto something with the land of the long white ash cloud, and perhaps we'll look into some kind of bumper stickers or something once we're done here, Natalie. Let's think about that when we get back to the office. However, let's us move on to our last speaker, tō tātou kai kōrero whakamutunga o te po, our last speaker of the evening, and then we'll get some time for questions and answers at the end. So to conclude our talk portion of the evening is Dr. Suzanne Phibbs, kai tahu, kāti mamoi, waitaha. Suzanne is a Māori health sociologist and senior lecturer in public health in the School of Health Sciences at Massey University. She has published extensively in the field of disasters and is an expert on sociology and kaupapa Māori research methodologies, Māori community resilience, disaster risk reduction, response and recovery. As a highly experienced journal reviewer and editor, she is committed to ensuring attention is paid to Māori voices and aspirations, and is dedicated to developing the next generation of Māori leaders, academics and researchers. Tonight, she will showcase the student capability and communication, and community engagement within Te Toi Whakaruru Hou. Etiwi, please join me in welcoming to the stage kia whakanui mai Dr. Suzanne Phibbs.
Tēnā koutou katoa, thank you, Matthew. So today I'm going to look at how we develop a resilient New Zealand through supporting Māori capability and the role that Te Toi Whakaruru has in that. So the aims of Te Toi Whakaruru are to establish ongoing collaborative research partnerships within Te Ao Māori, enhance positive Māori development through strengthening Māori research leadership and workforce capability, advance Māori disaster risk reduction scholarship, create and where appropriate apply Mātauranga Māori to innovate disaster risk reduction knowledge and practices, and build Māori disaster risk reduction research capacity responsive to Tokatuaki's needs, aspirations and research interests. So the ways in which we are doing that is through Noho Marae, which are interdisciplinary research wānanga, writing retreats with mentorship support, researcher exchanges, stipends for postgraduate students, conference support, community support through targeted research grants, and through developing the centre. So we were launched in 2020 and we started supporting communities and students and doing all that work in 2021. We began as a small 3-year research program and it was so successful that on the 1st of July 2022 we transitioned to an ongoing program and the funding for that program doubled. So in terms of looking at student stipends, we've supported 6 Masters and 16 PhD students through the program, and the range of disciplines supported include engineering, civil, geothermal, seismic and environmental engineering, and that's our largest cohort of students. Emergency management, projects include happy responses to climate change impacts and health and disasters. Volcanology, sustainability, disaster risk and resilience, public health, including environmental health and disaster recovery, Māori studies, including whānau resilience and urban planning, Mātauranga Māori, including disaster recovery and emergency management, Indigenous studies, focusing on disaster response, environmental planning and management, and disaster economics. So we have quite a broad church that focuses on science as well as social science research capability. Some of the linkages to institutions that we have are listed there. There are others as well, and we have linkages with iwi right from the bottom of the South Island to the top of the North Island, so right across New Zealand as well. One of our flagship programs is the annual 3-day Noho Marae, which the students that we support and emerging researchers attend. And I just want to point out, I just want to point out here, seeing we're talking about volcanoes, that's the volcanic plug that we went out to see on Banks Peninsula at one of our Noho Marae. So the role of the Research Noho is to provide cultural support and research mentorship to emerging Māori disaster risk reduction researchers in culturally supportive settings. So not just students, but also emerging researchers. So in May 2022, for example, we had a 3-day Hui Wānanga at Onuku Marae on Banks Peninsula. The wānanga was led by senior Māori researchers and local cultural po, including Tamak Solomon. 18 Māori disaster risk reduction researchers explored research and supported possibilities and their aspirations for Māori resilience. Field trips explored the volcanic, seismic and cultural heritage of the area. Researchers' needs involved creating opportunities to meet face-to-face or kanohi ki kanohi and support students with publications. And so one of the outcomes from these research noho is that Te Toi emerging researchers are being supported to guest edit a special issue of the Australian Journal of Emergency Management for emerging Māori disaster risk reduction researchers, and all of the people who are contributing to those journals are either students or emerging researchers who are early on in their publishing careers. And we engage in residential writing retreats as well. An example of that is the Bay of Plenty in December 2022. We have a program that is involved in developing future leaders through our leadership mentoring program, and that started at our first hui in 2021, and Tamak Solomon was the inaugural speaker. And it's really exciting to see that program coming through to fruition and to see some of our emerging researchers and students stepping up. So as an example of that, at the Resilience to Nature's Challenges Symposium in Wellington in May 2024, 11 members of Te Toi Whakaruruhau o Aotearoa participated as panel members, workshop discussants, poster presenters and research mentors. We also provide iwi and hapu disaster risk reduction and resilience grants. So examples of those grants include Te Tau Ihu, Tasman-Marlborough region, funding to develop and implement Māori disaster preparedness and emergency management training. Maupoko Tribal Authority in the Horowhenua district, creation and implementation of Tribal Disaster Resilience Plan. Ngāti Kahungunu ki Ahuriri, Hawke's Bay region, Dr. Anthony Cole, following Cyclone Gabriel, did some GIS mapping of environmental land damage caused by Cyclone Gabriel to inform risk reduction and resilience planning. Te Arawa, looking at research exploring intersections between Mataronga Māori, volcanic materials, built infrastructure and economic development. And we're developing new relationships with Whakatū, Ngāti Apa, Whanganui Iwi and Ngāti Awa as well. In terms of building relationships, that's one of the kaupapa of this program, and one of the ways in which we do that is through inviting guest speakers to our Noho Marae. So at the Noho Marae this year, which was held in South Westland at Bruce Bay Marae, Professor Sandy Morrison focused on her work with the Deep South Challenge, and she attended that wānanga. and Māori leader Ngāhiwi Taumoana from Ngāti Kahungunu considered traditional Mataronga Atao or environmental knowledge and the need for ecological balance as a flood prevention measure. We also hold a monthly seminar series. We provide postdoctoral support. We provide support for emerging researchers. And we also create international linkages through attending international conferences and doing presentations and supporting other people to attend as well. Okay. Thank you.
We're going to take this time now to move to questions and answers, and we use what time we do have remaining for that. But before I do that, tēnā koe, Suzanne, I think that was really interesting and I think really exciting to see in particular the emergence of young Māori academics coming into the field. I'm sure that's something as academics yourselves you find very encouraging, and in particular in this field. So we really appreciate you being here, and all of you being here today, and all of you being here today. And I think you can hear outside just the kind of conditions we're dealing with on this balmy Tuesday evening. But let's take the time for questions and answers now. If you could raise your hand if you do have a question for our panel. The wonderful people at Te Papa are going to come around with a microphone and give it to you. And I will ask that you wait until you have the microphone in your hand and then ask the question. And that is for the benefit, I believe, of those online as well, so they can hear questions and answers for our panellists. So let me open the floor now to anybody who'd like to ask the first question. Please raise your hand now. And similarly invite those at home online to submit questions if there are any. I always find it's a bit like an auction at this point. You wait till the first bid and then it kind of sets everybody off a little bit. Okay, there we go. We got a 50 in the corner. No, I'm only kidding. Okay, let's come to the front here first. We'll go 1, 2 here, and then 3 in the back corner in that order. Tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe. Would you like me to stand, or is it better just to sit?
I think you could stand if you would feel comfortable, and those at home could see you too.
Ka pai. Tēnā koutou katoa.
Kia ora.
Ko hini mō kātini tōku ingoa, no porirua i nai nei Atiawa Raukawa Toa Rangatira. I've worked in the Remo space for a few years, but recently I noticed in one of your slides when you talked about innovation of reducing hazard risks and that mātauranga reducing those risks. I find, working in the space, that science and research is important, but there's a non-palatable gap between what's absorbable by iwi and hapu on the ground and how they utilise that to do their risk reduction planning and their response and recovery during natural hazards. So what I find is there's a gap for all kinds of reasons. It's no one particular pointed problem. It's like housing's a problem, you know, everything's expensive, and so when you throw in, oh, there's a hazard coming up, so you've got to plan for that, and you've got to reduce your risks by having a whānau plan and having this kind of plan and a community plan and all of this, that's like added to the pile of issues. So how do you get the science and the iwi mātauranga to meet at a palatable level on the ground so that it is actually practically implemented? Because in my view, on the day, we all become one people who have to respond to a hazard. Whether it's Māori or non-Māori, we become a community. And so how does that knowledge become palatable to hit the ground in such, you know, trying times right now with all the climate change, with all the financial stress people have? So the research and the science that you do, what part of it, it's good to have up-and-coming scientists and researchers, but where do we get it to meet? And sorry, but I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here. It's actually the councils. Anyone from council here? It's actually the councils that make decisions that affect the community. So the science and research and mātauranga is not quite going to the people who make the decisions that affect the people on the ground. You see what I'm saying? So I'm just asking, how do we marry it all up and collectivise so that the decision makers that should be giving this science and research, it should be going further to the ground level. How do we make that meet?
Thank you. A really good question. Tēnā koe te pātai, and I'll turn to...
Do you want to go?
You're going to hand it over to the scientist.
No, I'm going to hand it over to the iwi board member, actually. John, you go first and then I'll follow.
I mean, I can speak from a volcanology perspective, and something we've done as a volcano community is taken our time to really understand the needs of the iwi that we work with in our areas, and tried to move beyond the good old colonial approach of we'll carry out a plan, it'll sit on a shelf, no one will ever read it.
Yep.
Not even council, not even iwi members, not even whānau hapu members. And so it was quite striking. When we started a lot of this research around our volcano areas, some iwi leaders said to us, we don't want another plan, we don't want another map. We want to sit at the table with our own data and make decisions equally with people like GNS and other agencies. And so, we've taken that on board, and it's also training scientists to step back a little bit and support those iwi aspirations around what they need in terms of technology. How can we assist them with monitoring to collect data? How can we assist them to analyse that data to make those decisions for their communities? Still doesn't answer your question around how we actually traverse that science sort of practice gap. And that's a really hard question. I think it's not just an iwi issue, it's a general Aotearoa issue, and that a lot of things that we do are not science informed, are not well informed. But I think iwi are probably a little bit in the volcano space. There is a desire for them to become more involved in collecting data, analysing data, and making decisions about the things that we need to make decisions around our volcanic environments. So it's changing the research world to realise that we're just researchers, we have some skills, we can share those skills, and as long as we're sharing them with the people that are saying what their aspirations are. And that's the hardest thing too, is getting those aspirations out of the community. What do you actually want? What do you actually need? Allowing time and a space and a project or a process for iwi to actually, or the community to actually articulate what exactly their aspirations are, what they need, and then how we can come in and support that. So it's not a quick and easy process. It's a rambling answer. Hand it over to social science, I'm sure they'll be more coherent.
I wouldn't say that. So the way we roll is tangata whenua. We're tangata whenua first and scientists second. So we don't go in and say, we're going to come in and do this research and we can help you with this. Often it's word of mouth. It's whakawhanaungatanga. I'll get a call from someone who says, such and such wants you to come and have a chat. They want to talk to you, they've got some issues. And I spend a lot of my job going into communities and listening. And then it's figuring out with communities, what are the issues for them and how we can help them, as John said. And that is where the science actually does meet practice, because it's in response to issues identified by hapu, by iwi, sometimes by extent by whānau. It's designed with them in ways that are meaningful for them, and it's addressing the issues they've identified in ways that are to the best of our ability, tika and pono. I have sat in committees with Māori and seen emergency managers, regional, Remo being an example, coming in and presenting communities with things, and it's not been safe. And I've been the voice that's got up and said, I can't see this community in that anywhere, and they've been upset about that. The Māori community haven't been. So that is the way we roll. I have to be honest, after working in this space internationally and locally, and being quite vocal at times, I've taken an awful lot of flack, and I've banged my head against a wall, and having just come off working with Nahiwi Tomoana and Sir Jerry Mataparai and others on catastrophic failures following Cyclone Gabriel. I sometimes feel those lessons are never learned. But every now and then, I see a little step forward. And what I'm seeing now is that we're in a space where our ways of doing are here to stay. They're not being shoved under the carpet the way they used to be. And I'm also seeing at the grassroots genuine, and John Ziwi's a good example because my job there is really just to do as I'm told and do everything I can to support what their missions are. And now I see your iwi has a well-developed, from a contemporary perspective, resilience and science plan, which they're in the process of starting to implement now. That's not what they call it. It's all about whakaoranga, creating well-being that's sustainable going forward. But people like us who are sitting in that space and opening the door for the next generation, and the young ones we have coming through, a lot of them have come through pura kaupapa, they're fluent in the real. They are operating according to the tikanga of their ancestors, but they're first-rate young Western science trained as well. It's a little bit about that old proverb. I'm translating it into English here for everybody. Pick up the tools of the white man, but don't forget your top knot. Aparina nata. Do you know what I'm saying?
I better move us along there. Thank you, and good question. And we do have time for possibly one more question, and then maybe one back there as well. So we'll go one here, one at the back, and then wrap up because we do have to let people also finish their shifts at the appropriate times. Tēnā koe.
Noted. Tēnā tātou. Kia ora rangatira, kei te mihi atu au ki a koutou. I'm actually a master's student from Canterbury. Māori and Indigenous leadership, natural disasters and rangatiratanga is my topic. So I just wanted to say I've been using you guys for 6 months now in my cycles, and it's lovely to actually see you in person and to hear your kōrero, so thank you. My question was about iwi relationships with central and local government. The Mike Bush Commission, for example, in March 2024, on the Hawke's Bay response to Gabrielle, suggests that there should be better recognition of kaupapa Māori inter-response planning. And my pātai to you is, what do you think that might look like at, well, central and local government level?
I've got a very unpopular response for some people. I believe there should be co-governance in terms of those sorts of responses. And in fact, the emergency management legislation that the the Ministerial Advisory Committee on Emergency Management was active in writing. There were 5 of us on it, a mix of iwi leaders, policy people. For my loud mouth, I got put on it. That would have given effect to all of that. From being very resistant to it, the current political infrastructure has changed quite dramatically. I can tell you 80% of what was in the previous bill is going back into the new one, which they're working on. I've had some interesting conversations with the new minister, and interestingly enough, he's been responsible for putting some things in place that I know communities up that Hawke's Bay have been waiting to see acted on for a very long time. I'll give the Wairoa area as an example of that, where the river had a massive issue causing flooding for quite some time with sediment build-up. I sat in a council meeting and watched someone from Hawke's Bay Regional Council come up, and I watched the community very politely, all dressed in suits, explain with people whose houses had been flooded, and this is part of the Māori community I'm talking about here, And the response from the gentleman in his big work boots and his shorts and a t-shirt was that, couldn't see it on his computer in Hawke's Bay, those issues, that resistance needs to be addressed. Some areas it's happening really, really well. Other areas it's going to take time. And Hawke's Bay is an area where it's going to take some time. But I think they've had a very big wake-up call.
I've got a bit of a succinct answer. And we discussed this on Monday with a group of Whanganui hapu as well. The current civil defence emergency management system is very much a command and control structure. Yeah. And so it's changing that system. But it's also removing the contradiction in that system in terms of, you're on your own for a number of days maybe. You have to make your own decisions. You've got to look after your own community. So you can't have a command and control structure that's not going to do anything or do anything for the community and tell them they're on their own. So you've got to allow communities to stand up when they need to declare an emergency when they need to. You've got to have iwi and marae be able to say, hey, we see something happening, we're going to stand up our emergency centres, we're going to enact our emergency procedures, and the CDM groups need to accept that they're making that decision, and then resources and actions need to follow once they've made that decision. Very simple thing that needs to change.
Thank you very much, and thank you, tēnā koe te pātai, and all the best for your studies. Kate, shall we go to the question online there to close us off for question time? And perhaps we'll hear from Poppy, who will communicate that to us.
Kia ora, mihi nui. So we've just got a quick last question from Joe online, who wants to firstly say ngā mihi nui to each of you, and has a quick question for John. When you talked of Pūrākau on battling mountains, Taranaki versus Tongariro, do you think that means they were concurrently active? I'd love to hear more about all those volcano stories. Sounds fascinating.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories, a lot of narratives, we should say, out there about the activity around our volcanoes. For me, there's a whole lot of, for Taranaki Uri and people on the ground, tangata whenua, mana whenua around the central North Island, there's a whole lot of metaphors associated with these moving mountains, the moving people, moving communities as well. But from a geological perspective, there were iwi in that area who were observing the landscape, observing changes, but simple things like recognising Tongariro, Ruapehu are andesite rocks. They find those andesite rocks all the way down the Whanganui River. They walk along the coastline, and then all of a sudden the andesite rocks come in around Patia, and they make the connection between the same rock types across the landscape, same type of volcanism, same type of activity. And so there's almost a scientific analysis or a geoscience analysis of these rock types. So how are they related? How did they get here? How did they move across this landscape as well? So, we can draw a lot of parallels between the knowledge systems to answer some of these questions that we do every day as geoscientists.
Fascinating, and I'm sure there is lots of really interesting kōrero. Thank you, Joe, for the question. Tēnā koe te pātai. And perhaps I will begin to close us by sharing Joe's sentiments and thanking the panel for being with us today. We really appreciate it. Distinguished Professor Christine Kenny, Professor John Proctor, Dr. Suzanne Phibbs. Thank you very much. Tēnā koutou, I tō koutou taonga mai tēnei pō. Can I ask you all to join me in thanking once again our panel for the evening? And thank you all for being here as well. Tēnā koutou, I tō koutou taonga mai. It wouldn't be half as enjoyable without you here. So thank you very much for being with us. And thank you all online as well who have joined us for tonight's kōrero. A really interesting and I think a wonderful way to close off what has been a really interesting series of the Active Land Talk series. So I want to thank the opportunity also to thank the team at Te Papa Tongarewa, tēnā koutou I te kaha o te manaaki. Thank you for looking after us so well, not just tonight, but of course throughout the series. We certainly could not have done it without you. And with that, I will now pass back to Kat, kia whakawhiti atu ki a koe hoa, and ask Kat to bring us to a close this evening.
Ngā mihi nui, Matthew. So yeah, I will keep this brief. Thank you so much for staying with us a little longer, but we wanted to give everybody the opportunity to ask some pātai. Yeah, it fills me with great honour to bring the series to a close. A huge thank you just I won't repeat too much of what Matt has said, but thank you to our wonderful speakers for your generosity with sharing your time and your whakaaro this evening. And thank you to Matt for facilitating so generously and thoughtfully across the evening as well. One final thanks just from us to Papa back to the Natural Hazard Commission Tokatuake. Thank you for your ongoing support over the past 25 years. Thank you to your funding. We've been able to connect rangatahi tamariki and general visitors with more information about natural hazards and how we can reduce risk in Aotearoa, New Zealand. So without further ado, this is drawing us to the close of our Active Land series. As I mentioned before, all of these talks can be found online, so please do look at our YouTube for this or the previous 2 talks. And thank you very much for joining us this evening. E rongo, ko te rongo āwhare, ko te rongo a marae, ko te rongo a te hā, ko te rongo mai whiti, kia hau mai ko te rongo, ko te maunga rongo, ko te rongo mō, e rongo, whakairia ki runga, kia tīna, humie, huie, tai, kie. Kia ora, get home safely.